as we learn in post-Hurricane Helene and Milton. It's really important. And if you want to create panic in the general population, cut their fuel supply off for 24 hours, or in their minds and in through the media that they're not going to have power, air conditioning, fuel for their vehicles, the ability to go about their normal lives.
Good day. We're here at Port Tampa Bay to have a conversation with its CEO, Mr. Paul Anderson, about the upcoming Florida Security Forum, hosted by the Global and National Security Institute at the University of South Florida in partnership with Port Tampa Bay. With no further ado, let's get started. Well, Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for hosting us today at the port.
Yeah, delighted to be here and have you here. This is a very important forum that we at Port Tampa Bay fully support and are committed. Very thankful that General McKenzie and team are hosting this. We believe it's hugely important to Florida leaders to be involved in a forum of this nature.
Yes, and what are you looking forward to the most about hosting the first Florida Security Forum here at Port Tampa Bay in conjunction with GNSI?
Well, first, creating awareness among state leaders. I believe it's so important. You know, we all talk about, read about everything that's going on in global geopolitics, what's going on with China in particular. But, you know, to bring it down to our state level and what are the potential risks and threats to critical infrastructure in our state and creating awareness among leaders. You know, they might know about it, but getting in a little bit more granular for them and for corporate entities that are operating in the state. The other thing I'm looking forward to is I always go, when I go to a forum of this nature, I'm listening to people who know so much more than I know on the subject matter. So it's an opportunity to learn, bring best practice, and really expand my knowledge and my team's knowledge and share those best practices with others. So for that, that's probably the most important thing I'm looking forward to.
Sure. Are there any particular policies or threats you really want to deep dive at the forum you want our people to focus on?
Well, I mentioned it. I very strongly believe in everything that I have become aware of over many years, both in government and in this position, and leadership roles in the port infrastructure world, the threat from China, the threat that they pose to both in terms of cyber, what their methodologies are for surveilling, for integrating. We've had multiple intrusions here in our complex, and it's a real threat. And so I believe that staying on top of this is really important, particularly for the type of attendee at the forum, and helping educate, creating that higher awareness of what that threat is, how they can prepare themselves, as we've worked really hard at. We'll probably talk about that. But you know, this is something, not just Florida Security Forum, this is a national security issue. And getting it down to our state level, as I said, to me is it's exciting that we're doing this. I think it's extremely important.
Right, because when people think about national security, they think about the federal government, you know, the military, but right here, you're on the front lines as well at the port.
Right. And, you know, we bring in almost half the fuel for the state of Florida. We're supplying for multiple military installations as well. Orlando International Airport, Tampa International. So in our region, there's almost 9 million residents who are depending on that fuel supply, but also over 70 to 80 million visitors a year that count on. So that fuel supply and the logistics of that is critical importance, and it's really one gateway here for that. So, you know, I believe that that's one of the areas that's of particular importance that we focus on a lot. And I think that creating awareness among others, power generation, we have those in our area of operations right here in the port. They're neighbors, and they're not, while they're not tenants, they're directly adjacent, where we have power generation for our citizens. As we learn in post-Hurricane Helene and Milton, it's really important. And if you want to create panic in the general population, cut their fuel supply off for 24 hours, or in their minds and in through the media that they're not going to have power, air conditioning, fuel for their vehicles, the ability to go about their normal lives. And Americans are very spoiled in that way, and they're not used to going without, or the risk that they'll go without. So it's important that we get this right.
Because many citizens might not understand the crucial role that the ports play, the resources you bring in, and the other roles you play within the local and regional communities.
That's absolutely 100%. Because the average person, even though we do a lot to help educate the public at large, the average person sees cruise ships coming in and out of the port. That's a luxury item, It's part of our Florida business model for tourism. For our state, which is so important, but it's all of the other things that we do. I mentioned fuel, aggregate. It seems like such a boring, non-sexy thing to talk about, but that's all of the road building material for the expansion that we're seeing. Again, looking at some of the risks that we could face, we have a major gateway bridge. For one point of entry for all that fuel. There's one channel, it's 40 miles long. We have some nearby critical stakeholders, MacDill Air Force Base, CENTCOM, SOCOM, plus all of the citizens and residents of this. Multiple counties live on these waterways. So the risk is always going to be something that we focus on and try and mitigate, prepare for, and be resilient.
Right. So how do you prepare for a disaster or a security risk that can come from a man-made origin, or even, like we mentioned with hurricanes, a natural disaster?
I believe it's really important. When we're talking about security, we're talking about resiliency and preparation. It starts at the top. That's with me and every organization. And it's got to be embedded in the culture of the organization. I've worked really hard on creating that here, not just in my team here at Port Tampa Bay, but our key stakeholders. And a lot of them already have it. We deal with multiple federal and state agencies that, they live, eat, and breathe this, and they're great partners. And, the United States Coast Guard is our, number one partner. Our port facility security plan is under their oversight. But all of our partners getting this into the culture of those organizations and then aligning them and creating really in-depth peer-to-peer relationships. So we're always a phone call away. We have satellite phones for all of our key employees. And not just only that, I make sure that every year, every satellite phone, just a little detail, but has, if you lose power or you lose the cell towers, and we can't use our cell phone, you have a satellite phone, you have those numbers that are critical programmed in your cell phone. It's a little detail. And it's my counterpart, commanding officer, sector commander at U.S. Coast Guard. It's the port director of Customs Border Protection. It's the sheriff. It's the head of our Florida Department of Emergency Management, whoever the key players are, and that filters down through our organization. I believe in it, and I think our team has embraced that, and we have some real people, again, know a lot more about this than I do, and that's for me, every good leader does that. Bring on people that know a lot more about a subject than you'll know.
Right. Well, and it's surprising because people might not think a cyber attack that takes out the cell towers is just the same as if there's a hurricane. So you have to be prepared for both those scenarios with your staff and then your local precincts.
Right.
As we look at the partnerships and dig a little deeper, let's look at the local partnerships here at the city level or within the state agencies, maybe Florida Department of Emergency Management, Florida Department of Law Enforcement. How do you work with them to ensure here, at the port, things are secure?
Yeah, so I mentioned that FDEM and FDLE, a very close working relationships. My head of security is a former FDLE, still a reserve, works very closely with all of our state and local law enforcement agencies. Emergency management, obviously, we have a direct line to the director and the deputy and the key staff there. And it really pays dividends to have these relationships established before anything ever happens, right? I mean, that's what, when we do exercises, we do an annual hurricane, we do a safety summit that General McKenzie has been very supportive and a keynote speaker, and many other leaders like him. It's creating the opportunity for the key people to come together and not only learn and see what best practice, what are the latest things, but to get to know each other. So you're on a first name basis. Give you a good example when after Hurricane Helene and we had power out to our 6 major oil companies. Keep in mind, with the exception of 2 of them, they're tenants. The others own their own property. We maintain the channels and the berths and so forth, but we don't own them. They run their own operations. But when something goes wrong, the media isn't saying X company, oil company, isn't providing fuel. It's Port Tampa Bay, right? So, and then power was the key issue. It wasn't that we didn't have fuel after those storms. There was plenty of fuel, not only here at the oil company's storage tanks, it was at most retail stations. They didn't have power, so they didn't have a way to pump fuel. But I was able to pick up the phone within, I remember it might have been 6 a.m. in the morning, immediately after Helene, speaking with Archie Collins, who's the CEO of TECO. And just having those relationships long before something ever might happen. And if somebody changes or somebody's new at the airport or wherever, you got to get to know them.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. You want to know who you're talking to, and you don't want to talk during a crisis. You want to have some relationship beforehand. Well, and we look at the local level, and like we said earlier, though, a lot of the national security discussions are at the national level, and you run complex operations here, so you have partnerships also with those national level agencies, Homeland Security, Customs Border Protection. How does that relationship work? Because you're managing these local relationships and national relationships.
Well, you've got to have excellent relations at all levels, and that includes our federal partners. I mentioned the United States Coast Guard, our sector commander, Department of Homeland Security. We every year compete for competitive grants for Homeland Security grants, and we've been extremely successful. And we utilize those dollars in those grants for a lot of it has to do with port, a lot of cybersecurity, software, cameras, updating systems. It's not just buying. We have bought some assets, some patrol vessels, emergency command center. Now, going over my tenure here at 13 years, we've never failed to get one of the grants. One of the little tricks we do is we don't ask for things we don't need. All right, we're very focused. We're very diligent about what we ask for, and therefore we're successful. But those relationships are really important. And we've had the Secretary of Homeland Security, numerous levels. They've done drills here on multiple different levels throughout the department and other federal agencies, FBI. I could name the Nuclear Detection Agency. They did an exercise here. And then during critical events, they stage here as well. Super Bowl, for example. So those relationships we maintain, and we're going to continue to do that.
Because you mentioned the grant funding from Homeland Security, and one of the things we're going to talk about at the Florida Security Forum on one of the panels is funding security, because you can come up with a great policy, but if you don't have the funding, you're not going to implement that policy.
That's right. And it's, also the state of Florida has a little bit of funding, not quite at the level of the federal, but we compete for that as well. For the state of Florida, specific for Seaport Grant security. So it's very important, but whoever's going to be at this forum, that they know and learn what the process is to be able to be competitive for those grants, because they can be very helpful. And it's a force multiplier when you're not coming out of your operating budget to be able to get a lot of these, because a lot of these systems, as I mentioned, software, the vendors, et cetera, they can be very expensive.
Sure. And, at the forum as well, we're going to have a lot of other representatives from ports all around Florida. So how do you work in conjunction with them? So you obviously have all these relationships at the local and national level. Now looking at the state, other ports in the state, Jack's ports, Miami. Yeah. How do you work with them?
We work very closely and at multiple different levels. So on the safety side, I mentioned our head of security. I think he chairs, we have a safety committee. They meet on a regular basis when we have Florida Ports Council in the past has been the vehicle that we do that. And then we have a security committee that works through that. When it was the legislature was creating the dollars in the budget for security, we all work together to support it, make sure, because there's also can be a lot of misunderstanding. I know you'll be surprised for my statement here that sometimes legislators, members of Congress, want to help do an issue, and sometimes you have to help get it. It's maybe they're using a sledgehammer to kill a mosquito, or vice versa. It's not going far enough. So we work very closely with our port partners to make sure that we work with creating good policy at the federal and state levels on security and other issues that impact ports.
Right, because it's putting in the right language that people can understand who might not have that expertise.
That's correct.
And the last partnership we wanted to explore is the growing partnership between Port Tampa Bay and the University of South Florida, the Global National Security Institute, and other entities at the university. How do you see that playing out as we move forward?
I see it. First of all, it's very exciting. The Global National Institute and Cyber Florida being participant. We help host one of those. We work with. How does the port work with the nursing college? Right, we have a great on port, first of its kind clinic here that nurses are working with. It's really, there's been terrific partnerships with USF. We have the logistics program, and I just could go on. So the goal is to continue to work with our great university partner that's right here in our community. It's so important to what we do. And, speaking of economic impact, we are the largest economic engine in West Central Florida. University of South Florida is one of the top three. And so working together is natural. And I think there's this relationship will continue to bring good critical expertise to many, many stakeholders. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing it.
Well, and as we wrap up our conversation, so we're going to be having our first Florida Security Forum. We're going to have representatives from the government, the military, industry, obviously the port, and academia. From that, what guidance would you give our speakers, the panelists, the audience, and where they should focus on security here at the ports?
Well, focus on the issues of the day. Mm-hmm. You cannot watch any news on your device, or social media. There's a lot going on in the world. And there's a lot of risk and we know where that's coming from. I think that focusing and tying into what those are, how to mitigate, how to invest wisely, to give their audience what's the best practices going on. We talked about how to get those grants, how to deploy them wisely, some of the areas that they should be investing, that they should be watching, some on the cyber side. What are some of the techniques that our adversaries are utilizing to gain access? I was just at MacDill and had a demonstration of their anti-drone system. We face drone threats here at the port, again, 40-mile channel. Some of 99% of any drone activity typically in the U.S., if it's not real estate related or it's recreational, but nonetheless, there is risk. So that's an area as well. I'm not sure if it's a topic, but that's one area that I see that is a risk as well. And with drones getting much longer legs, if you will. They travel 500 miles or more. In some cases, there's a real risk. But focus on the issues of the day. Give your audience ways that they can mitigate those risks.
And lastly, what outputs are you expecting? So we're going to have this great forum. We're going to have all these conversations. What are you going to be looking for after the forum's complete from the speakers and our researchers?
Well, I think it's always good if you get, first of all, great results on your post-forum survey. Should you do one of those, I'm sure you will, that people come away better out, knowledgeable, educated, and they develop 4, 5, 6 key relationships with either vendors, other people. In my case, it could be somebody, even though we have those other ports or vendors that provide services. So building relationships, come away and then follow on. Okay, hey, let's come and talk. One of the key takeaways that we consistently get from our safety summit, these security forums, or what have you, is somebody approaches us and says, hey, we've got this this system, we'd like to test it. It could be a tethered drone, could be underwater drone, it could be some kind of new software. Can we do a beta test this at your complex? And so those are the kind of things when I say develop relationships, bring those back and then follow up. Just don't go to this conference and go, okay, I've gained a lot of knowledge. Follow up, see where areas you can further develop relationships and create a better, more thorough system in your enterprise for protection of security, cyber, all the areas that this forum is going to be focused on.
Right, because the threats are evolving, so the conversations have to continue. They can't stop here.
Has to be very fluid. Absolutely. I'm very excited about the forum. And we're going to look forward to being partners on this annual event every year.
Well, thank you so much for hosting us, Mr. Anderson.
Delighted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tad, good to see you.
And with that exciting discussion, we look forward to seeing you at GNSI's first Florida Security Forum, hosted on November 4th at Port Tampa Bay's Terminal 6.